A mercenary who doesn't die in battle is considered cheap. The only reason he gets paid so much is because he's willing to die for his master. The image shows the moment of a strong blow or injury, accompanied by a spurt of blood and an expression of pain and shock on the person's face. I have to listen to this nonsense every day. The process of pouring liquid from two vessels is depicted, which forms a bright flame. Well, nothing can be done. Such is the lot of a mercenary. Lucian Waldeck says this against the backdrop of a fire. The guy says that aristocrats are all sickeningly predictable. The man says that when they are needed, they promise land, and even titles. But in the end, they take their words back, coming up with all sorts of excuses. The guy says that what was just said was the most outrageous. Then he explains that he must have misheard. Lucian Waldeck says, "Is this true, Commander-in-Chief?" The longtime commander says that the interlocutor misheard, he just said to die. The man says he's lost his memory and forgotten who he is. The aristocrat says he hasn't forgotten and calls him a mercenary captain. Lucian Waldeck laughs and says that it turns out that the interlocutor says this knowing who he is, and also says that he did not know that he could joke. The guy says it's clear that this isn't an order, otherwise there would be no point in asking a pathetic mercenary. Lucian Waldeck says that he will die with honor in battle, as if he were some noble knight. He stands, looks into the distance, and keeps his hand on his belt. The man says that perhaps he expressed himself too bluntly. The man asks for forgiveness if he misled anyone, and Lucian Waldeck asks what misleading. The knight says that he only wanted to entrust the last task, and explains that after a series of defeats, he says their collapse has become inevitable. The commander reports that, in the end, the blades of the traitors have turned against the defenders of these lands and are already at the throat of the Crawford family. Lucian Waldeck says he realized there was nowhere left to run. Lucian Waldeck laughs. Lucian says he understands the commander perfectly. He informs him that it's time for him to leave, explaining that a man with unrivaled talent in the Empire has found himself in trouble, having been pressed so hard. Lucian Waldeck says he was quite reasonable. It's a shame things turned out this way, and yet for an aristocrat, it's understandable. The man explains that his last assignment, in this chaos, requires him to scout out an escape route. The commander informs that the task is simple, and that tomorrow the traitors will launch a full-scale attack, and then asks to be nearby and hold back their onslaught at least for a moment. He reports that until their master hides in a safe place, and if that doesn't work out, the commander-in-chief says that, then we must hold on until the master dies. The man says he will give the rest of the payment at the end. The man reports that a stone of this size is more than enough to support a detachment for 3 years. The commander asks what this means. Lucian Waldeck says that he must ask, and asks if it is true that he was taken for an idiot just because he smiled all the time. Lucian Waldeck says the other one just wants to use them as human shields. Lucian Waldeck says that even if they help, they won't last long, and asks if he's willing to use them just to buy his master some time to escape. He then explains that even if by some miracle they survive, what will happen next? Lucian Waldeck says he doesn't believe these bastards will just let them go. The commander says that Lucian Waldeck understands everything. He says that they are mercenaries, not knights, and reports that the enemy knows this, so as soon as he dies, the army will scatter. Lucian Waldeck says that's exactly how their business works. Lucian Waldeck says that the interlocutor understands everything perfectly well, and explains that for these monsters, they're squad. Lucian Waldeck says that this is only a sworn enemy, who is disposed of without hesitation. A man in armor coughs. A man in armor raises his hand. Another man in armor approaches him. A knight stabs another knight in the stomach, causing him to cry out in pain. 2 knights in armor report that they did not expect such a turn of events. The man says it's a trap. The man says that they are not allies, but mercenaries from the Fang Squad. The knight on horseback says that they are bastards and dressed in the armor of their fallen soldiers. The man says they have no honor. The man says, what honor is he talking about? There is a dead man lying on the ground, with the legs of another knight standing nearby. The man in the helmet reports that he has already cut off the heads of several commanders. Lucian Waldeck says that one must understand that this is the only way they have survived to this day. Lucian Waldeck says that these bastards are now much more eager to tear them to pieces than to get to the master. Lucian says that it is not worth saying that, and asks if this is what the interlocutor was counting on, and then says that they will divert all the attention of the opponents to themselves. The man says he'd better focus on the task at hand. He says that he will have no choice but to kill Lucian Waldeck and take command of the squad. There is no other way. Lucian Waldeck wants to attack the commander. Lucian Waldeck says he thought he was at least a little different from the rest of the aristocrats, but it turns out he's the worst of them all. The man in response asks for forgiveness and says that he says this sincerely. Lucian Waldeck says that apologies are not necessary and that it is even better this way because his conscience will not torment him over the head of a bastard like him, even if he throws it to the dogs that are waiting below. The nobleman asks if Lucian Waldeck is considering buying off the traitors with his head and begging for his life. Lucian Waldeck says that despite his desire to simply hand him over and leave, he will do so. Lucian Waldeck says he is sure that the interlocutor has already taken care of stopping them and reports that, in that case, Lucian Waldeck informs that the rebels will be satisfied with the heads of 2 commanders, and in exchange will spare his men, and also explains that as a commander he is obliged to fulfill his duty to the end. The commander asks why 2. The commander asks if he is really going to offer them his head for the sake of his subordinates. Lucian Waldeck says these are the people he pulled along with him and promised to prove to them that even starting from the very bottom, dreams can be realized. The man says that they trusted him and went through this process to the end, so he must take responsibility for it. Lucian Waldeck announces that he is their commander. The man expresses surprise. He laughs and says that everything is correct. The man says this is the sign of a true leader. The aristocrat says that it's a pity and that if it weren't for this Crawford. Lucian Waldeck says that if his master were the interlocutor, Lucian Waldeck is thrown back sharply by the blow. Lucian Waldeck says that if he cannot win, he will die. The aristocrat looks pitifully at the mercenary. Lucian Waldeck says not to forgive him. Lucian Waldeck says he expected this outcome, but Lucian Waldeck says he didn't think the gap between them was so wide. He says it's a cursed talent. Lucian Waldeck says he believes this is the end of the appointed hour. Lucian Waldeck says that in the end he was always prepared for such a death, and that one thing still haunts him. Lucian Waldeck says he will have the same chance as him. The guy calls loudly for the master. Lucian Waldeck blinks. The guy says, "Wake up." Lucian Waldeck says, "Who?" Only the arm in the frilled sleeve is shown. The guy begs him to wake up. The man responds by asking, "What the hell is going on?" Lucian Waldeck touches her face with her hand. Steam appears on it, and she says she doesn't understand what it is. Lucian Waldeck says he was just slapped. The man says he is asking to come to his senses, sobbing at the same time. Someone addresses Lucian Waldeck as young Master Lucian. Lucian Waldeck says he can't believe it and asks what exactly happened. He says that no matter how you look at it, Lucian Waldeck says something is very wrong here. Lucian Waldeck says, first, what happened to his hands and where did the calluses and scars go? Lucian Waldeck says the skin isn't just clear, it's like that of a pampered aristocrat. He says, what else? The man snores, clinging to the bedspread on the bed. The guy is crying loudly and Lucian Waldeck asks who the hell he is, explaining that he just beat the guy half to death and now he is crying. The man says he is glad to see the young gentleman, and the boy says he thought Lucian Waldeck was dead and nearly had heart failure. The servant says that if something bad happens to his master Lucian Waldeck, he will be in trouble. Lucian Waldeck says he doesn't understand what nonsense the other person is talking about. Lucian Waldeck says that in his life there were no such words as young master, personal servant, and estate, and yet he clearly remembers that he died. He says that no one can survive after something like that, whereas Lucian Waldeck says his head is still on his shoulders. He is silent and looks at himself. Lucian Waldeck says that if you put it all together, the conclusion is obvious, and right now, it is. He reports that he is in the body of some stranger and explains that this body. Lucian Waldeck says he also has such an incredibly handsome face. He says that it is immediately obvious that this refined appearance belongs to an aristocrat. We are talking about a man from an obscenely rich family. Lucian Waldeck says the first step is to gather information. The boy approaches Hans with a question. Hans informs him that the young gentleman can ask anything he wants. Lucian Waldeck asks what year it is. The man replies that Lucian Waldeck must still be on medication and informs him that it is the year 846 according to the imperial calendar. Lucian Waldeck says he can't believe it. Lucian Waldeck says that it is 15 years before his death and asks if it means that he has returned to the past. Lucian Waldeck says he has no idea how or why it happened, but panicking won't help matters. Lucian Waldeck says that we need to focus on the main thing now, and then asks the next question. He says that his personal servant Hans is apparently tired of living. Hans apologizes and asks what exactly is meant. Lucian Waldeck says that for a pathetic servant to dare touch his master while he is unconscious, and without permission, have the rules changed here? Lucian Waldeck says that, if not, then answer who he is. The man apologizes to Lucian Waldeck and explains that he was so excited that he completely forgot himself. The boy informs him that the young master is Lucian Waldeck, the third son of the great Waldeck family. Lucian Waldeck reacts with surprise. The boy thinks about the word Waldeck and remembers that this is the same Waldeck, which I'm thinking about. The Waldeck family is a famous family, one of the pillars of the empire, to compete with even the imperial family near the emperor. This is a truly great house. The man yawns. He says he died and woke up at his old job at the Waldeck estate. Lucian Waldeck says he's the third son of the Waldeck family. Then he says it's just ridiculous. The man says he suffered throughout his life because of his lowly origins. The man reports that he lived a long and unhappy life. Lucian Waldeck says he's suddenly being given a chance now. Lucian Waldeck says he always wondered how high he could have flown if he had the same opportunities as others. Lucian Waldeck says fate has decided to give him an answer. Look carefully. A man opens a window and stretches his hands out. Lucian Waldeck smiles and looks happy. Lucian Waldeck ponders what kind of life he will reach. Lucian Waldeck reports that Waldeck Manor does not disappoint and that he has been almost everywhere during his time as a mercenary. Lucian Waldeck says he has never seen such luxury. Lucian Waldeck says he'll have to get used to this place quickly. He says that, although Lucian Waldeck reports that since he left, all the servants have been acting differently. The girl asks if it's true that the young master is the only one, Lucian. The woman says he woke up, and the man says they said he died. Lucian Waldeck says he's being looked at strangely. A man and Lucian Waldeck stand in front of a group of people who are looking at them. He tells Hans that the atmosphere seems strange. Hans explains that this is natural, since the young master locked himself in the room and no one but him was allowed in. The guy reports that a whole year and 2 months have passed. Lucian Waldeck says he doesn't understand what this even means and asks what Lucian was missing, that he barricaded himself in the bedroom. Even if we attribute everything to the whims of aristocrats, he simply would not have been allowed to behave so willfully. This house is ruled by a titan, a man with unwavering principles and convictions who has defended the empire for centuries, Archduke Sigmund. Lucian Waldeck says he would silently watch his son rot in the corner and explains that one of two things means. Lucian says that either he is such a hopeless slacker that he is about to be disinherited, or the Archduke has a good reason to turn a blind eye to this. Lucian Waldeck says that until he figures out what's going on, he must avoid meeting his father at all costs. The servant reports that the reports of Lucian Waldeck's full recovery were not false. Mr. Lucian says that seeing the young master after a whole year is an immense joy for the humble butler, and calls the young master Lucian. Beretsky asks how you feel and if it's hard to walk. Head butler Edwin says that in his youth he was taken to the estate as a hostage from an enemy family, but his exceptional talents were recognized and he was entrusted with the management of the entire estate. The man reports that this is the right hand of Archduke Sigmund. Lucian Waldeck says it's a bad business. He ran into the one he least wanted to see, and reports that he couldn't help but notice his street manners. He says the only thing that saves him is that the butler hasn't seen him for a whole year. Lucian Waldeck says that in that case he will have to play the most noble man he knows. He thanks the head butler Edwin for his care. Lucian Waldeck says that thanks to the prayers of his interlocutor, he feels much better. He says that he has been neglecting his duties for so long, locked in his room, that he decided to go out and find out how things were going on in the estate, and meeting his interlocutor was a great success for him. The man says he hopes their family prospers. Lucian Waldeck remains silent. The man says that the Waldeck house is as strong as ever, and that it is gratifying to see that he is also full of strength. Lucian Waldeck says he doesn't understand what problems there could be, and asks how such a butler is running the business. Lucian Waldeck reports that the butler doesn't seem to suspect anything, and decides to continue as before. Lucian Waldeck says he wasted no time in worrying. He's calm now and can walk, though a little tired after his first walk in a while. The man apologizes for his bluntness, addressing the young gentleman. The butler reports that he is forced to ask to stay longer. The man reports that Archduke Sigmund wishes to see Lucian Waldeck immediately. Lucian Waldeck is amazed. The man says, "Young master." Lucian Waldeck looks at the gentleman with embarrassment. Father says he has a question. A man explains why Lucian Waldeck is still alive. The man asks again, why? Lucian Waldeck doesn't know what to answer. He says he's asking for forgiveness and asks in what sense. The man says he intended to turn a blind eye to it. The father says he could have tolerated it if he had neglected his duties and acted like a spoiled child, using his mother's death as a cover. The man says that Lucian Waldeck crossed the line here and explains that it seemed to him that it was not enough that he did not leave the room for more than a year in protest. A man says Lucian Waldeck disregarded his own life and attempted suicide. Lucian Waldeck says he doesn't understand what this is all about. He says, "Stop," and says that he now understands why the servant was crying. Lucian Waldeck says he thinks there was a misunderstanding and says this is the last chance. The man tells Lucian to lay out everything that is on his mind. Lucian Waldeck carefully considers his response. The man says that isn't this what Lucian Waldeck wanted and why he created all this fuss. He even decided to swallow some sleeping pills, just so the gentleman would listen to him. Lucian Waldeck says it's now clear why he has no memories. Lucian Waldeck reports that he died around the same time, and now he is talking with Archduke Sigmund Waldeck. Lucian Waldeck reports that the Duke has 4 sons, all from different mothers. It is said that he had many encounters with young gentlemen and their mothers, but he has no recollection of ever seeing Lucian Waldeck or his mother. Lucian Waldeck reports that he has entered service and, for some reason, repeated her fate. Lucian Waldeck says he thought he and his mother were just too much, but it was actually different. The death of his mother and the precarious situation in the family became an unbearable burden for the child. He reports that Lucian Waldeck then decided to take a lethal dose of sleeping pills. Lucian Waldeck says that in order to attract the Archduke's attention, he sat locked up for more than a year, but did not take into account how weakened his body was, and his body could not withstand the effects of the medicine. Lucian Waldeck is reported to have simply died. Lucian Waldeck says that at first he thought that the Archduke was being too harsh with his son, whom he had not seen for a whole year, and notes that things are. He says that now, knowing the whole background, one can understand Sigmund, no matter how great a ruler he was. The man reports that in his heart he was probably terribly worried, like any father would be for his child. Lucian Waldeck says, now is not the time to worry about other people's feelings. He says that he himself has 1 foot in the grave, and that it has been made clear to him that this is his last chance. Lucian Waldeck reports that this is a real ultimatum. He says his golden future is falling apart. Lucian Waldeck says that if he blurts out a word, the boy asks Lucian Waldeck why he's crying, and he says it's simply astonishing. He says the Archduke will be displeased, and at best he'll be sent to some remote monastery to atone for his sin. Lucian Waldeck says that he could be sent to the wild north, where he will spend the rest of his days suffering from the bitter cold and fighting off monsters, and adds that he will have to travel as a beggar. The guy says that he got this life at too high a price to waste it so senselessly, and that he will never allow his precious life to be destroyed. Lucian Waldeck says it's because of some family drama that he has nothing to do with. He says that since he was told to speak frankly, he will do so. He explains that the main issue will be that he has tarnished the honorable name of the Waldeck family with his insolence. Lucian Waldeck offers his sincere apologies and says he is grateful for causing his father so much worry. Lucian Waldeck says that he is the only one to blame for what happened, and he has no excuse. He will accept any punishment without complaint. The Duke says that you can't bring back the past with beautiful words, so Dad says maybe they should just be happy. He says that. Lucian Waldeck says he miraculously held on to this life and no longer intends to cling to the past. The sound of a foot hitting the floor is heard. Lucian Waldeck says that if he can succeed, he can change fate and the future. He asks not as an archduke, but as a father to tell him at least a word of advice. Lucian Waldeck says that a lost child sincerely repents before his parent, and the parent readily accepts him back. He says that according to the laws of heaven, there is a true bond between father and son. Dvoretsky says it's incredible. The atmosphere has really changed. The man says that this is really young Master Lucian, the same boy who used to flinch at every rustle. Father reports the sound of a heartbeat. Lucian Waldeck stares ahead, his heartbeat audible. Father says that Lucian Waldeck dares to raise his voice and lecture him about his fatherly duties, and then demands an answer. Lucian Waldeck says he has no intention of giving up. He says that you can see a lot if you live in the world long enough. Lucian Waldeck says he can't afford to be weak. He says this. Lucian Waldeck says it all worked out and explains that instead of beating around the bush, they had to go straight ahead. Lucian Waldeck reports that his father can't stand cowardly mice, and that he prefers wild dogs that can bare their fangs. The Duke explains that the nearness of death has truly deprived someone of something important. Lucian Waldeck says he'll take care of his worthless body, and then Lucian Waldeck is thinking in his head about what he will do next. Remembering my past death, he announces that he will take up fencing seriously. Lucian Waldeck says he'll have to get his frail health back on track first, but he'll take up fencing. The man asks if Lucian will really take up fencing. Lucian Waldeck says that if you eat well and sleep a lot, then perhaps something will work itself out somehow. Father says that Lucian Waldeck has a gift for speaking. The Duke says that time will tell whether these are empty words or not. He tells the butler to order that he be given it again. The man says that this will benefit him far more than moralizing, which he'll ignore anyway. Lucian Waldeck stands to the side. The man says he obeys, Your Highness. He says he will immediately begin preparing. Lucian Waldeck says it and asks what they are talking about. The man explains that the chest contains everything he needs for work and asks for help. Lucian Waldeck says this is nonsense. He says that this is what it means to be of high nobility, and explains that underneath this mysterious thing there turned out to be simply an indecently large amount of money. The guy says it's only for 1 month, and with that kind of money. Lucian Waldeck says that if he has enough gold, he can completely remake this. He says that the body is pathetic, and says that he can create that very elixir. The image contains no text or character's speech, only the interior of a bright greenhouse with flowers. The man says he won't interfere this time and that Lucian Waldeck must handle the situation himself. Lucian Waldeck says he has no intention of giving up and intends to prove his case. The man explains that if Lucian Waldeck loses, the consequences will be severe. The man says the late Duchess treasured this place most of all. The man says that the gentleman hasn't been here for a long time. He was expecting something like this, but he didn't think that he would come in person. Lucian Waldeck reports that it all happened because of how young Master Lucian had changed, and explains that even though he had fallen out of favor with his father, he says that he is still the son of the late Duchess, whom the gentleman loved so much, and he would never abandon him to the mercy of fate. Lucian Waldeck says he can't afford to be weak. The man says it was a pitiful sight, and explains that his gaze was constantly shifting, as if he was deathly afraid of something. The man reports that Lady Lucian Waldeck asked me to tell you that he is already waiting. He says that as soon as he raised his voice, someone started whining like a beaten dog. The man addresses Lucian Waldeck, calling him, Your Grace. The man says his behavior was so different from her character that he decided he only got his mother's looks. The man reports that today is the first time. The man says he caught himself thinking he might be wrong, and asks if the other man has ever seen someone meet his gaze directly and say what they think. The man reports that he held himself surprisingly firmly, and there was a real calm and dignity in his demeanor. The man reports that young Master Lucian is naturally very thoughtful and gentle, and believes that's why he seems so far behind the other brothers. He explains that her ladyship's blood flows in his veins. The man says they still have to figure it out. The man says that the trials that await this child cannot be overcome by just talking. The man remains silent. The man reports that a problem has arisen. Lucian Waldeck reports that the maintenance payments for young Master Lucian have been resumed, but evidence of embezzlement has been discovered and the investigation points to this. He reports that a second young gentleman, Geordie Waldeck, is involved in this. The man says that he fired the head maid who served the third master and put his man in her place, and Lucian Waldeck says that the boy is capable but too narrow-minded, and this is his main flaw. The man says he understands the dislike for his third son's maternal relatives, but the obsession is surprising. The man asks if he should take special measures. Lucian Waldeck tells the butler not to interfere. The man explains that it would be cruel since he's only just begun to take his first steps. The man says that if he were to pay close attention to his surroundings, such antics would not even touch him, and says that, in any case, the third son is simply paying for his cowardice last year. The man says that everything turned out perfectly and offers to see how he copes with it, and also says that if he can't even solve such a problem, then there's nothing to expect from him. Lev informs that the blood of the Waldeck family can become the key, and the door must be opened with one's own hands. A few days later, the woman says the young gentleman has locked himself in again. The man in the background stands by the door with his hands raised. The guy expresses determination and tension. It's been 3 days since Lucian Waldeck received the funds, and he's screaming in surprise. The man reports that the young gentleman said that the conversation with the Duke went well and the funding was restored. The image shows a chest containing gold coins and jewelry. The man states that, knowing their relationship, it must have been difficult for him. He must have had to gather all his will into a fist. The guy says he's now trying to move on, despite the heavy burden on his soul. The red-haired man says he has no money. Lucian Waldeck throws down gold coins. He says that if he has so much gold, Lucian Waldeck laughs and says he says he has a pathetic body, but he can create that very elixir. Lucian Waldeck stands at the table and studies or examines something. He breathes heavily and raises his hand to his forehead. Lucian Waldeck says that Hans probably has a lot of questions, but since he is guarding the door as he was told, he is loyal. It is reported that the Duke's son suddenly took up alchemical instruments, although he had never handled them before. Lucian Waldeck reports that he was also looking for a herb that costs a fortune because it grows only in the moonlight. It's reported that the properties of the moongrass haven't been fully studied. It's also said that the child spent every penny he had to buy it. Lucian Waldeck says that Hans, it is not too late, and tells him to buy up all the moongrass. The voice says that he might look like a crazy person now. Lucian Waldeck reports that only a year has passed. He says no, 20 times it will cost. Lucian Waldeck reports that it is a fortune. He thinks that the alchemist's courage should be commended, then he clears his throat. It is reported that at that time, the success of that very remedy was in serious doubt, but they nevertheless took the risk and bought up all the moongrass in the empire. It is explained that this was the bet of a lifetime on which the fate of their guild depended. Lucian Waldeck says that thanks to their audacity, he says that nectar is the drink of the gods. It is reported that for daring to name a simple potion after the gods, they were even reportedly threatened with charges of blasphemy. The text reports that as soon as the item's properties were revealed, everyone immediately began praising it, forgetting their previous threats. Lucian Waldeck smiles, and a faint glow appears around him. For over 1,000 years, there has been an absolute, irrefutable truth that a warrior's level is determined from birth, and this limit cannot be overcome. It is reported that no matter how hard you try, it is impossible to break the shackles of restrictions, as was previously believed. The voiceover says that what destroyed this immutable law? Lucian Waldeck reports that it was indeed nectar. The guy says it's enough to just drink it. It is reported that even the complete mediocrity turned into a passable swordsman. They say that the effectiveness of Lucian Waldeck's version is not comparable to the original, and in terms of quality, it is more like a cheap consumer product. Lucian Waldeck says there is no better way to get such a battered body back on its feet. He thinks the young aristocrat is lucky. It is reported that when the empire was later engulfed in turmoil, the Alchemists' Guild was the first to burn, and the nectar recipe that would tip the balance of power was deemed too dangerous. Lucian Waldeck says he was destroyed. He says he was able to recreate something similar by collecting all the available bits of information. They say that during the experiments, most died from side effects, but then they say that it's enough to drag things out. The woman says bon appetit. The scene depicts a splash of water. There is no text or speech from the characters. The main thing is what happens next, the result of the transformation of the power of nature into the power of man. The word mana is shown on the stage. Lucian Waldeck explains that the quality and power that can be drawn varies dramatically depending on how well the circulation, the process of distributing and returning mana throughout the body, is going. He reports that he is now using the power of nectar to forcibly expand the blocked channels of this body. Lucian Waldeck says that even if the channels have opened, he does not understand what is happening, and explains that the body's resistance, which inevitably occurs when absorbing mana, does not cause pain at all. He says that on the contrary, it flows freely, as if returning to its native element, and explains that even in the bodies of newborn babies there are impurities that interfere with circulation. Lucian Waldeck says that the image says that this is one of those who are called geniuses. The image contains no text or speech, but only depicts Lucian Waldeck swimming or falling in the depths of the water. The image has no text or characters, just a view of a city with houses and towers at sunset. Lucian Waldeck declares that he cannot allow himself to be weak, because weakness is death. He explains that if he is not strong, he will not be able to protect those he loves. Two guys are walking down the hallway. A man notices the door opening. Lucian Waldeck asks Hans if anything happened while he was waiting. A boy shouts at Lucian Waldeck, asking if he knows how much time has passed since he entered. The guy says that he called them, but they did not answer, and explains that they themselves strictly forbade entry, so the guy says he was very afraid that something had happened to them. Lucian Waldeck says he was so worried. He says there's no need to worry because he's always there and will protect you. He explains that even if something happens, he won't let it happen. The boy addresses Lucian Waldeck as young master. The guy on the right says he doesn't understand. The guy on the left also says he doesn't understand, and Lucian Waldeck explains something while holding a magnifying glass. He says he has a strange feeling that he is facing a completely different person. The guy says that he knew the old Lucian better than anyone, and it's not surprising that he sensed something was wrong. A hand places its palm on a man's chest. Lucian Waldeck reports that his appearance hasn't changed much yet. The text says that what's happening inside is much more important, and changes are happening there at an incredible speed. Lucian Waldeck reports that it's all thanks to his innate abilities. The scene depicts feet in boots taking a step. Lucian Waldeck says he is sure of it. The text states that this boy's potential places him among the greatest heroes who have changed the world. Lucian Waldeck says that if he plays everything right, then in just a year he will surpass his former mercenary self. He tells Hans that everything worked out thanks to him. Hans asks what he's talking about. Lucian Waldeck says that a misdeed is followed by punishment and a merit by reward. He says that if he can't complete the task, he will die. The guy swallows silently and listens. Lucian Waldeck tells you to sell everything you have and buy as much grass as possible, promising that life will be easy and pleasant. He laughs. Lucian Waldeck says they'll climb to the very top together. The man says he envies Hans. He says that in his time such gentlemen were hard to find. The guy says he is a young gentleman. The inscription announces that a quiet forest will arrive in a week. Lucian Waldeck describes how they are walking through the forest. He walks along a forest path, whistling and relaxing with his hands behind his head. A guy is walking next to him. Lucian Waldeck says what bliss is and asks if life can be so simple. He says the sumptuous dinner is always on schedule. He reports that the rooms are spotlessly clean and he didn't lift a finger. He says that they even make up his bed for him. Lucian Waldeck says he used to be constantly hungry. He says that thanks to this, he was able to fully focus on recovery. The man says he is still thinking about what has been bothering him. At this very moment, a guard from the Waldeck house named Jake says stop and warns not to move. Lucian Waldeck says he checked with the captain, who said he had never hired anyone even remotely similar to him for the guard. Lucian Waldeck says a stranger is now taking over his former shift. A man places his palms together, holding a thin object between them. It's probably even better this way. This meeting would have brought nothing but extra headaches. Lucian Waldeck says he's not ready to see himself as he once was, and that he'd probably just die of shame. His whole body is shaking. The guy looks at him with concern. Lucian Waldeck hears someone addressing him as Young Master Lucian. The guy asks if he's really going to go in there. The guy says Lucian Waldeck said his feet would never be on the training ground again. He says that he didn't say that. The man says that it was he, the young master. The guy says that after the scolding from the second young master, he swore he would never come back again. Lucian Waldeck reports that, judging by Hans's reaction, he has a rough idea of what happened here and explains that fencing is a required skill for the Grand Duke's children. He reports that for the second young gentleman, this was an ideal excuse under the pretext of learning fencing. They reported that young Lucian had been instilled with an animal fear of violence. Lucian Waldeck reports that they made sure he didn't go anywhere near the training ground. He says he has an idea what's going on, but there's nothing to worry about. The guy says that all this is left in the distant past and asks the young gentleman. Lucian Waldeck tells me to just trust him. The guy stands behind me and listens. A man announces that the castle is on alert and asks another man to be on guard. The second man explains that everyone is prepared for an attack and that they will not allow enemies inside. The man says he doesn't believe what he heard and asks if it's true. The man asks if the third young master really came here of his own free will. The other man says he's sure of it and reports that the third young master is currently inspecting the training grounds with his servant. The man says that if he can't find a way, he will have to give up on this matter. Lucian Waldeck says he couldn't forget what happened that day, even though it could work to their advantage. He says to report everything immediately. The man says he'll prepare a warm welcome for him when he gets here. Lucian Waldeck says he was hoping for this turn of events, but it exceeded all his expectations. He says that not only is there a lot of great weapons here that won't break after a couple of hits. The voice informs that there is enough space for any maneuvers. Lucian Waldeck reports that all this wealth belongs to just one person. He says that if he could train in such a place, perhaps he would be able to save more of his people. Lucian Waldeck says his eyes didn't deceive him. The man says that it is indeed the third young gentleman, and the guy says that it is a surprise, and he couldn't even believe his eyes. Lucian Waldeck says he still remembers how a year ago, during training with Lord Girardi, they ran away from here with their tails between their legs, not even daring to look back. The man says it's just like a lamb running away from a wolf. Lucian Waldeck says that this is probably why the interlocutor still trembles with fear at the sight of his place. The guy reports that since they dragged the servant into the sacred abode of warriors. The man says he hasn't seen the young master in a long time. Lucian Waldeck stands silently nearby. The man reports that a year ago, he and the second young gentleman personally ruled the stand. Lucian Waldeck says that if they haven't forgotten, of course. The man says it was a glorious time. Lucian Waldeck says the other person is impudent. He says that this is fun. The image contains no speech bubbles. It shows a knight in full armor with a sword, standing in the center of the frame. The caption spells out the word knight. The text states that the embodiment of honor and loyalty typically comes from noble families. From a young age, they undergo rigorous combat training and are taught etiquette. Lucian Waldeck reports that only after accumulating enough merits on the battlefield do they receive the title of knight. He says that in the end, they are no different from chained dogs and expensive collars. Lucian Waldeck says that at least that's what they say. They are obliged to honor the bearers of noble blood and let the Lord shower them with wealth and honors. The man says that this guy dares to behave so brazenly. The man reports that Lucian's precarious position played a role. A man with a chain around his neck says he's only let loose like this because he feels supported. The man behind him stands silently, holding the chain in his hand. Lucian Waldeck says that if he says he could give him one hell of a workout, and throws a knife at a target next to the man. The man is horrified by the surprise. Lucian Waldeck informs that if he does this, the Archduke will not forgive it. He explains that the knights are the family's main fighting force in any case, and that punishing them without official procedures will only create unnecessary tension in the relationship between the lord and his vassals. Lucian Waldeck says it's too early and the time hasn't come yet. He says it's foolish to avoid the training grounds because of things that happened long ago and announces that he plans to come here often from now on. Lucian Waldeck says a whole year has already passed and suggests they make up for lost time. The man replies that this happens often and is surprised that the third young gentleman would say so. The man laughs and says that Lucian Waldeck has a good sense of humor and then says that it is too late, and he declares that he wants to learn fencing. The man says that since Lucian Waldeck doesn't know, he'll explain that if he's over 15, it's all over. Lucian Waldeck asks if 16 isn't too late. He then explains that sword form is a secret technique, a legacy of... He reports that the one who gives enlightenment belongs to the one who repeats its movements. Lucian Waldeck reports that this is the essence of ancient wisdom that develops the body. The voice says that everything makes sense only if the path of magic is open, and from the age of 16 this path closes, so the technique turns into an ordinary exercise. The man explains that the sword form without enlightenment is just an empty shell and meaningless movements. The man says that this might suit the young master, and informs him that he has a chance to become the greatest master of the Empire's losers. The man says to save time and find your true calling. The man says that if things don't work out, he can always devote his life to tending the garden. Lucian Waldeck says that in the end, everyone has their role. The man reports that he has swallowed his tongue and cannot speak. The man's eyes are accompanied by a message that the statement about closing the path of magic at 16 is a lie. Nonsense that will fall apart at the first inspection, but it doesn't matter, and then Lucian Waldeck could just play dumb and let it all slide. The text states that the goal would have already been achieved. An idiot, unable to even object, crushed by his own ignorance. The eyes tell you that this is a non-entity, laughed at by his own servants and afraid to even move. The hand tells you that the nature is pathetic, just like it was a year ago. The woman speaks to Mr. Hendrick. Lucian Waldeck says that some of their words do not match what he knows. The man explains that the path of magic closes at 35, not 16, and therefore, as far as he knows, there's nothing stopping him from starting training right now. He asks if the man is sure about this. The man explains that it seems the man is mistaken. Lucian Waldeck asks if Brother Geordie thinks the same way. The man says it's a well-known fact and explains that all it took was mentioning his name, and he wouldn't even dare argue. The man says his brother said the same thing and confirms it's true. The man thinks that's all there is to it. Lucian Waldeck claps his hand. He tells Hans that the Waldeck family is under a curse. The man says that he thinks so too, right, and the guy turns to him, calling him young master. Lucian Waldeck says that he is being dragged into this in vain, and that they are questioning a self-evident truth known even to a fence cur. The man says that people are still confused about this at such a young age, and how many talents have been robbed of their chances by this erroneous fact. The man says he's about to burst into tears of grief. The man reports that his own brother is the owner of an empty head. Lucian Waldeck asks what they are talking about. He says that if the interlocutor's words are true, then this is a disgrace for their family and a real catastrophe, but he demands that they not stop him. The guy asks if his interlocutor would deceive him and clarifies that he is the son of his lord. A man screams. Lucian Waldeck and a boy stand next to him. The man says he doesn't understand what is meant and asks if the other person means to say that he tried to deceive the young gentleman. Lucian Waldeck tells him to forget what he just said and explains that he just said something stupid because he couldn't believe his ears. The man says that a knight of the House of Waldeck would never stoop to such baseness. He smiles. The man says it's natural. Lucian Waldeck says he thought so. The man says that they especially cannot just turn a blind eye to this. Lucian Waldeck says what happens when you let your tongue run wild. The man reports that Sir Hendrik clearly doesn't understand how serious this is. The man asks what Lucian Waldeck is talking about, and Lucian Waldeck explains that if the man simply wanted to humiliate him, he would have ignored it. He says that not only the knights, but everyone here looks at him with contempt, and explains that it is his fault that he forgot about his duty and wasted his time. Lucian Waldeck says that this is not something to be reproached for. He says that if the knight and his brother, the mainstay of the ducal house, are depriving them of talented fighters because of false information, he cannot turn a blind eye to this, but suggests leaving it. The man explains that this will undermine the military might of the Waldeck knights and threaten the safety of their subjects, which is the foundation of their well-being, and also explains that this is a huge risk. Lucian Waldeck reacts silently to this. He says that as a bearer of the Waldeck name, he should of course be furious, and notes how coolly he turned it around. The man turns to Sir Hendrik and says that he now understands the seriousness of the situation. Lucian Waldeck says to prepare for the consequences. He says that he will report this to his father and ask him to tighten internal discipline. The man tells them to wait and explains that the boy used to tremble at the mere mention of his father. The man says he doesn't understand why he's making a mountain out of a molehill and asks if the brat was always like this, explaining that he was as timid as a lamb. The man says that he is like. Lucian Waldeck puts the ring on his finger. A knocking sound is heard. The man asks what all the noise is about, and he reacts with surprise. The man with the mustache says this is Mr. Geordie. Lucian Waldeck says that he decided to grace them with his presence just in time. The man says it's him again. The man says the second young gentleman is Geordie Waldeck. Lucian Waldeck says he has no intention of surrendering and says that if they want to kill him, they should do it right away. The man replies that he doesn't intend to kill Lucian, but wants to talk. Lucian Waldeck explains that he doesn't trust the man's words and won't listen. The man runs to Lucian Waldeck and says that he will explain everything now. The man says that this is actually the case. The man says that's enough. Lucian Waldeck says there is no need to explain. He says he saw this disgrace with his own eyes. Lucian Waldeck says the man was provoked by a boy young enough to be his son and is deeply disappointed. He says to make the face simpler. Lucian Waldeck says that if they don't want to disgrace him even more, he says he can't let them leave. The guy explains that if they leave, they will die. The guy is shaking and asking what they should do, and he reports that Mr. Geordie seems to be furious. Geordie Waldeck says he has the right face. He is reportedly the second son of the Waldeck family. Lucian Waldeck reports that ever since he gave up searching for himself, all he does is take it out on the servants at night and explains that he is a true aristocrat, so that his just an inflated ego and a nasty hysterical character. Lucian Waldeck reports that the main thing is that he is vindictive as hell and immediately kicks out. He greets Geordie Waldeck. Lucian Waldeck says that he sees that his interlocutor has been living well and reports that this is even to his advantage. The man says that he is indeed a dumb boy and asks for forgiveness. Lucian Waldeck says he saw everything from beginning to end, despite the fact that the interlocutor could have said something to Sir Hendrik. He says that if he can't get what he wants, he will destroy everything that gets in the way. Lucian Waldeck says that Sir Hendrik has long since retreated and asks if he could be more specific. He says that hiding behind his name and sowing discord was a clear mistake and that the man cannot escape responsibility. Lucian Waldeck says that he is not going to scold him for this, explains that he knows very well how much blood he has shed for the House of Waldeck and what the price of his loyalty is. The man says that, unlike his interlocutor, the man says that Lucian couldn't even stand sword training and ran away with his tail between his legs, and asks if Lucian really thinks he has the right to blame anyone for anything. Lucian Waldeck says that first you need to learn to respect knights. He says that it is thanks to them. Lucian Waldeck reports that the Waldeck family still exists. The man apologizes to everyone for today's commotion, caused by someone else, and explains that this is just the mistake of an unreasonable child, so he asks for leniency. The man says he will be more careful with his wayward younger brother in the future. Lucian Waldeck says he understood how his interlocutor decided to play the card and reports that he has a pot of tea. The man reports that he was actually hurling insults at them, but Lucian cleverly turned everything around to make it look like he had insulted their kings. The man reports that he also presented himself as a noble defender. Lucian Waldeck says, okay, 1-0 in favor of the interlocutor. The man says that this is as expected from an older brother. He responds with a question. Lucian Waldeck reports that there was only a slight misunderstanding between him and Sir Hendrik and explains that he should be held accountable for his insolence. He says he learned a valuable lesson instead. Lucian Waldeck says he's a fool for calling his brother's head an empty skull. The boy begs him to just shut up. The man says he is ashamed of the offensive words he said. Lucian Waldeck says that today he, the younger brother, was once again illuminated by the light of generosity. The man tells Hans that he needs to write down his brother's wisdom immediately, and Hans explains that paper is no good and that he needs to prepare better silk. The man says that he is using another person to erase the image of the weak Lucian and to be etched into the memories of everyone who is here, and announces that the former third son will no longer exist. Lucian Waldeck says that that non-entity no longer exists. He says that now he will probably go. Lucian Waldeck says there's no point in either of them staying here. The man says that Lucian doesn't respect anyone at all and asks if he thinks he can just up and leave. Lucian Waldeck says he hasn't forgotten. A man reports that his father has been keeping an eye on him lately. He explains that he has nothing to lose, and the other man. Lucian Waldeck says he will take this as consent. He says he went, turning to his brother Geordie. Lucian Waldeck says, "We need to get going and get out of here," and the guy shouts back, "Young gentleman." The man says he's addressing Lord Geordie, his back turned. The man with the mustache says they're really going to let him go just like that. Lucian Waldeck says he can't afford to lose. There is no text or characters in the image, so it is impossible to describe actions or speech. Lucian Waldeck announces that he will go first, and the boy explains that he will follow him. The guy sighs heavily. The guy asks if they will get anything for this. Lucian Waldeck says he knows Lord Jorai's temper better than anyone. The guy says he won't let them get away with it. Hans says that even if they part easily, he's sure the terrifying night will finish him off somewhere in a back alley, and no one will even know. Lucian Waldeck understands and tells Hans to calm down. The man says that only someone who has gone through it himself can understand this fear. The man reports that incompetent management not only ruins everything, but also washes its hands of it. Lucian Waldeck says he knows how shitty this feeling is, but it's not going to happen, so get up already. The guy says he won't sit idle either. Lucian Waldeck says Hans got it because of him. He says that when a boss acts like an idiot, it's always the subordinates who suffer. Lucian Waldeck says that his personal servant must have had it the worst of all, and the servant responds, turning to the young master. He says that this is what he promises. The guy says that he won't let problems happen because of his stupidity in the future. Lucian Waldeck says his men have been humiliated or made to tremble with fear, and suggests they try, turning to Hans. The sound of popping sounds can be heard against the backdrop of the building and the clear sky. Lucian Waldeck and a boy walk down the hallway. He says that since that incident at the training ground, he has been wondering why everything is so quiet around him. Lucian Waldeck says the Geordie he knows isn't the type to sit back and take it. He says that's how it is, and that they were plotting such a petty, dirty trick behind his back. Lucian Waldeck says he has been waiting for this day for a long time. The guy says that the young gentleman is right, and that they can't let this slide under any circumstances. Lucian Waldeck asks if Hans is ready, to which Hans replies that he is ready, young master. He says he can't believe they dare touch his money. The guy is screaming that he wants to get his monthly payment too. Lucian Waldeck reports that it all started with the budget report he received today. He says that it was the day when his account was supposed to be replenished so that he could buy everything he needed, and that it was supposed to be like this. Lucian Waldeck says that he says he doesn't understand what's going on. Lucian Waldeck says the result. Lucian Waldeck's allowance has been cut by 75%, and Hans's monthly salary has been cut by 30%, exactly. A man reports that his cursed second son has been trying to steal his money through the head maid he assigned to his outbuilding. Lucian Waldeck reports that the door is locked and explains that the king has the key. The boy says that if the door opens, it will mean the king has already returned. He reports that despite this, he managed to pull off something outrageous because he gave in to a weakness that was taken advantage of. After the death of the third mistress, Lucian's mother, Lucian, handed over the management of his budget to another person. The woman says that this is Dana, the former headmaid, who served him faithfully for many years. The woman says that this is not the girl she is talking about. The woman reports that she is seeing Lucian Waldeck in person for the first time. Jenny says it's a pleasure to meet young Master Lucian and announces that she is the new head maid, replacing Lady Dana. Lucian Waldeck says he wanted to introduce himself immediately after his appointment, but at the time, the other man didn't want to leave his room at all. The woman says that they have finally ended their long wanderings. He warns her to watch her tone when talking to the young gentleman. Lucian Waldeck tells Hans to calm down, as she is partly right, and Hans turns to the young master. He says that today there will be no nitpicking. Lucian Waldeck says there are more important things to do right now. The girl says she'll get straight to the point. Lucian Waldeck asks if the girl made a budget. The girl smiles and covers her mouth with her fingers. The man asks if he was called because of the budget, and the girl says that she was the one who wrote out the budget. The woman reports that she was told about the transfer of authority from the previous head housekeeper and explains that she was simply doing the job as instructed. The woman says she is a little stunned and doesn't understand why she is being questioned if she was simply doing her job conscientiously. The woman reports that Lucian Waldeck himself was originally supposed to do this. He says he thought she would use it as cover, but it was clearly Lucian's mistake. The woman says she understands and suggests that Lucian Waldeck really had no choice. Lucian Waldeck says that even if you put that aside, there is something he cannot come to terms with. He reports that he checked and found out that most of the funds sent by his father went to increase the salaries of the servants. Lucian Waldeck says that given how much they suffered due to his negligence, this can be considered compensation. He says that Hans's salary was not only not raised, but even cut, and asks to explain why. The man says it's too obvious. The woman says she didn't notice that this happened and must have been a mistake, and Lucian Waldeck explains that when you're responsible for the whole house, you can't keep track of everything. The woman says everyone here can attest to how overworked she was and asks if that's true. The men respond silently to her words. A woman says Ms. Jenny has been especially busy lately, and another woman confirms this. Lucian Waldeck says they will definitely help her better from now on. He says he can't afford to relax. Lucian Waldeck says he can't stay here any longer and leaves. The boy says it's unexpected. He says this body belongs to him. The guy looks scared. The woman stands behind them and smiles. A voice reports that all the limbs seem to obey someone else. The man takes a step. Lucian Waldeck tells the head maid that he will ask the last question and asks her to answer carefully. He says he knows who your real master is. The woman says that regarding this, she thinks it would be worth asking young Master Geordie first. To survive, you have to get rid of the rot. The sound of a door opening can be heard against a background of a sign depicting a mug of beer. A guy in a red cloak asks a young gentleman if he said he was going fishing today to unwind. The boy asks why they are here. Lucian Waldeck remains silent. The man shouts that he is betting his entire monthly salary on his opponent and accuses him of being unable to move properly. The man tells him to keep going like this and suggests that he see how close Lucian Waldeck is to death. He says he doesn't feel it. The man reports that it is in such places that large fish live. Lucian Waldeck informs him that this is not the place for a brat like him to make mistakes and advises him to listen to him and leave while he is still good. A man grabs Lucian Waldeck by the clothes and he looks at him in surprise. Lucian Waldeck says, "What kind of tavern is this where the bartender is so picky with the customers?" He says he's asking if the other person has mixed anything up. The woman says there are several reasons why she hasn't finished off the head maid yet. She is reported to be the daughter of a wet nurse who raised Geordie from the cradle. The man warns that touching her will only cause more problems. Lucian Waldeck and the boy stand nearby. He reports that his side is in complete disarray, even worse than he thought. The man laughs. Lucian Waldeck says that since the situation is so bad, he says that if he can't save her, no one can, and explains that he's not going to let her die. Lucian Waldeck says he cannot afford to be weak, because weakness is death. He says that the wine he is drinking was made this year, and explains that it was aged in an oak barrel. Lucian Waldeck informs that then he will have to show them what he is worth. There are cards and chips for the game on the table. He takes a deck of cards and begins to shuffle them dramatically in his hands. Lucian Waldeck says you can make money at the same time. The man says the opponent seems like a tough guy. The guy asks his brother how many wins in a row this is. He says his brother is pretty good. The man says he lost. Lucian Waldeck says that everything is already done and interest has only just awakened. He says he can stay and play another game. The guy says he'd better go. The man says the young gentleman has already gotten the hang of it. Lucian Waldeck says no one can defeat him and asks who's next. He says he came because of rumors, but is surprised that's all they can do. He is silent. The man announces that he is betting all his chips. The door opens abruptly. Lucian Waldeck raises his hand to his head and looks forward with a slight smile. The man reports that everything is going according to schedule. The man buttons his shirt. The man apologizes for not recognizing such an important guest and apologizes for the late greeting. Hugo says that his name is Hugo and he is the manager of this establishment. A man snaps his fingers. The red-haired man expresses confusion. The blonde man explains that due to certain circumstances they had to close early and apologizes for the inconvenience. The waiter on the right says they'll definitely accept it next time. Lucian Waldeck and the man behind him walk toward the exit while the woman and the young man stand behind them. The man says that it might be an inconvenience to other guests, but what difference does it make? The man says that the main thing is that young Master Lucian can rest peacefully. Lucian Waldeck says that he hasn't been out in public for a long time, but he was immediately recognized and explains that probably, without such a sense, one cannot survive in their world. The man apologizes sincerely for the delay, and he says there is no need to worry, he just came to unwind. The man says it's really impressive and that he hasn't seen a guest hit the jackpot like that in a long time. The man says that if allowed, he will personally form a party. Lucian Waldeck says that he does it personally. The man says he's nowhere near the young master's level, but as the manager of the place, he's learned a few tricks over time. The man suggests cutting down the time. The boy asks to go home, and Lucian Waldeck says that they have already won enough. The guy says he has a really bad feeling about this guy and that he's seen a lot of creepy people in the palace, so he knows. The man says that such eyes are very rare. Lucian Waldeck says Hans's years of service were not in vain. He says that perhaps the interlocutor is right. The man reveals that he is Black Shark Hugo. The man says this name will eventually shake the criminal world. The text tells us that the hero's journey began in the dark alleys of a city, and he had nothing but brute physical strength. It is said that thanks to violence and intrigue, no one could stand in his way, and he quickly rose to power, bringing gambling, smuggling, and even contract killings under his control. A man announces that he has become the king of the night, ruling the criminal underworld of the 5 territories. Later, taking advantage of the impending collapse of the empire, he secured the title of baron for himself and became one of the imperial generals. Lucian Waldeck says he's still just a newbie, and the man says Hans is right. This guy is dangerous as hell. He says he's not going to kill. He explains that he wants his opponent to understand what it means to lose. The man says that today he came to catch him too. There are 5 cards lying face down on the table, laid out in a row, and game chips are visible in the left corner. The guy suggests playing a simple card game. The man says it sounds good. The man says he doesn't want the young gentleman who has honored them with a visit to get bored. Lucian Waldeck says that this is the mood and reports that he has finally found someone with whom he can talk normally. The man says it would be an honor, young sir, and explains that he is a typical brat who acts tough just because of his last name. The man says he doesn't even realize that with his words he's tightening the noose around his own neck. The man places the card on the table. The man says that this is even better. The man places the card on the table. The man says he didn't plan for his visitor to be completely robbed. Lucian Waldeck claps his hands. He says that green youngsters like him get stuck deeper with every loss. The man says he will squeeze Lucian Waldeck dry, calling him a naive boy. Lucian Waldeck says he's lost his manners, and the man asks if something's wrong. The man says he will answer as he pleases, and she says it is nothing serious. But before we begin, he would like to ask something and asks if they mind. Lucian Waldeck says that they are seeing each other for the first time, but his interlocutor already likes him. The man says that a leader can be recognized by the way his people behave. Lucian Waldeck says that his interlocutor's business is not entirely legal and that managing it on such a large scale is not an easy task. He says that if he had crossed the line, they would have been recognized and removed long ago. The man says that he knows his place and tries not to anger the masters above. Lucian Waldeck says that you need to relax. He explains that although they are from the Waldeck family, they are not the type to strangle everyone indiscriminately. He says he wants an honest answer and asks when they plan to start mass production. The man asks what exactly they are talking about. The man says it's time to forget about the crap he's been up to in Vestra. Lucian Waldeck reports that this is the same illegal hallucinogen. The man says he's referring to the crap the other guy is stirring up in Vestra. Lucian Waldeck reports that this is the same illegal hallucinogen. The man laughs. The boy explains that there is nothing in the castle except servants and guards. The guy says he can't believe it happened. The man says he doesn't know how to play poker, but is willing to try. The man says he doesn't understand what Lucian Waldeck is talking about and asks what hallucinogens are. Lucian Waldeck explains that the man heard him perfectly well and doesn't understand why he asked again. Hans plays chips on a stack. Lucian Waldeck says that you were hired by the family of Marquis Logreen. He reports that the goal is to destabilize Waldeck with drug trafficking. Lucian Waldeck says that the Marquis has stooped to such cheap tricks and that there is a line that must not be crossed. The man asks if he agrees. The man says that in this case the defeat will most likely be on the other side of the fence, and states that nowhere else will one find such impudence to test something like this on the lands of Waldeck. The man says that if you just stumble and get caught, anyone who is loyal to the Waldecks will be torn to pieces. Lucian Waldeck reports that everyone, without exception, He says that he must be confused right now and explains that failure means death. The whole plan is revealed. Lucian Waldeck reports that the Waldecks are the worst possible opponent. First, it's stated that this would have only been discovered 2 years later. Then, the man explains that the Duke would then have received a report on drugs in his lands. The man says he would have set up shop, but the man reports that Hugo would have already fled the city by then. The experience of the past failure proved useful. The man says the young master is some kind of misunderstanding. Lucian Waldeck asks what misunderstanding means. The man says he is just a small trader and is counting money in his shop and explains that he cannot sell drugs. The guy says that probably envious people started a dirty rumor and asks to give him a chance, promising to find the one who spread it himself. Lucian Waldeck says this is a false rumor. He says that the rice mill that the man runs is just an ordinary one, and the underground passage underneath it is just a back exit from the castle. Lucian Waldeck says he's asking for the last time and wants to know what stage the plan is at. The man replies. The man says he didn't expect such a turn of events. The man thinks he knows about the fake shop and the secret passage, and since he knows so much, there is no point in making excuses. A sound appears, accompanying a sharp movement of the hand, and the word then appears. The man says that maybe we should kill him. A man holds a knife in his hand. The text states that an unguarded nobleman's puppy can be killed with a single blow. The man hides the knife behind his back. Lucian Waldeck tells you to think carefully before fighting. The guy stands behind Lucian and looks tense. He says that another person's life is at stake. The guy looks scared in response. The user did not provide an image or scene description. Please provide an image or text for analysis. Lucian Waldeck says it's worth being careful given how he's risen. The man says he's a moron and asks what he was thinking, then says it's about an attack on the Waldeck heir. The man says it's like begging for death. The man closes his eyes. Lucian Waldeck says you have to save your skin. The man asks for mercy. Lucian Waldeck says that they didn't just come to him personally for no reason. He says that otherwise his head would have already flown off his shoulders. The man says that if they tell him to become a dog, he will be a dog. If they tell him to bark, he will bark. If they tell him to crawl, he will crawl. Several men are asking for mercy. Several men kneel before Lucian Waldeck and beg for mercy. A man places a chip on a stack of red chips. Lucian Waldeck says he's put all his chips in. He says that an obedient dog won't bother him. The man says they need extra hands. He thanks them and promises to do anything if they order him to. The guy says he knows. Lucian Waldeck says, "Isn't that boring?" and explains that the other person doesn't seem like someone who's content with being a hunting dog. He puts his hand on the man's shoulder. The man asks if he wants to become a knight. A man asks a question, asking to be a knight. The man says he once dreamed about it like crazy, but eventually had to give in. Because over time, reality set in. The man says that no matter how much he trained, the man says that no matter how much he risks his life for the master. In the end, Lucian Waldeck remained. The man holds a small bag, which he hands to Lucian. The man explains that it is merely a useful tool for the nobility, and explains that his lowly origins cannot be changed no matter what he does. A man asks himself if he wants to become a knight. The guy falls face down on the floor. He says he would sell his soul to become them. The guy asks if he really can. Lucian Waldeck swears by the honor of the Waldeck family. He says that if he has enough honor and dignity not to be ashamed of himself. Lucian Waldeck says status won't be a hindrance. He says Hugo and asks if he wants to live as a human being and not as an instrument. It is reported that several days have passed. The girl and woman say they'll let them introduce him to everyone. The man says he's a talented fighter they hired from outside. Lucian Waldeck explains that there is nothing in this world that cannot be bought with money, and explains that money is power, and power is authority. He says to introduce himself. Hugo announces that from today on, he will serve the young master. The man says he would be happy to work together. Lucian Waldeck says that he is not going to do anything he does not want to do, and that he will not listen to anyone but himself. He says that since they are done with the performances, they need to bring the head maid. The man says he is the head maid and asks why they are suddenly calling her. Lucian Waldeck says the head maid should greet them too. The woman says that the last thing she needs is to be scolded like last time, and says that she will have to report to the busy head of the maids first. Lucian Waldeck says they are behaving exactly as he expected. The man says they don't need any trouble, and the other man asks them to just sit quietly and not make any nonsense. The thought is that it won't be possible to have a good relationship with this character, and it's obvious to everyone. For them, the young master is like a rotten rope, terrifying to grasp. Lucian Waldeck informs them that if that's the case, he'll beat it into their heads. On the table, there is an open bottle of ink and a pen. Next to it, there is a bucket with rolls of paper, and also a gramophone with a record and a set of needles. The man tells the young gentleman to understand our situation. Lucian Waldeck says the crown is a symbol of power and responsibility that he must accept to protect his kingdom and people. The man reports that Lord Geordie is giving the head maid special attention and asks if the other person is aware of this, then says that they cannot have power. The woman says he's right and asks him to understand them. The man says he doesn't understand why they're deliberately escalating the conflict. The guy says they just want to live peacefully, like before. The guy yells at everyone to pull themselves together and reminds them that they have completely forgotten about their responsibilities. The guy reports that the owner of this estate is young Master Lucian. The guy says it's not the second gentleman Geordie. The man stands silently. The man tells Hans to leave it to him. The man says that the correct speech of the interlocutor is too great an honor for people like them. The boy tells the young gentleman that he has understood the task, and Lucian Waldeck says that he has already. The man says that it is easier for bastards who have forgotten their place to kill the loyalty of a simple man. The man says it might be a little rough. Lucian Waldeck asks for permission. He says that Hugo is truly resourceful, and that's the primary reason he hired him, and that he was lucky. He explains that Hugo's addiction was only in its early stages, and if it had progressed further, even he wouldn't have been able to help. The man squeezes the other man's shoulder and says that of course he allows it. That's just what he was waiting for. Lucian Waldeck tells him not to worry and to give them a hell of a show. The man replies that he will do as he is ordered. He says he can't let this go on. The man says he's come to pick up Lucian. He explains he's not leaving. The man says he ordered Lucian to be brought, and he should follow him. Lucian Val. The man says he can't understand how anyone can be so huge. The guy notices that the man seems even bigger up close and wonders why he looks so creepy. The man tells her not to be afraid and explains that, after all, he is just a backstreet thug. The man says it's better to choose the right side. The man says that he has no idea how cruel Lord Geordie is and reports that the situation has long since turned in his favor. The man says the other isn't foolish enough to risk his life for a pittance. Lucian Waldeck reports that these are pathetic last words. The man says he doesn't understand what's happening. A man says another man has something and gets punched in the face at the same time. A guy with purple hair delivers a powerful blow to a man in black. The man says it's impossible, and the woman says it can't be true. The man falls from a height. Lucian Waldeck, wearing glasses and smiling, speaks while the red-haired man watches in shock. A man stands in a room with his fist clenched, and a person lies next to him. The man says he can't believe he was beaten. The man shouts and accuses the other of being violent, and also says that even if the young master brought him, it does not give him the right to do whatever he wants. The man says he has more than enough rights. The man says he specializes in raising crazy bastards. The image contains no text or speech from the characters, but shows a cup with a drink on a saucer. A man reports the sound of a door slamming. The sound of the door opening is heard twice. The girl screams that she has been released and demands that they let her go. The girl screams that you shouldn't think you can get away with it. The man tells her to shut up and listen. He says that the girl still doesn't understand the situation. The girl says that he dares to raise his voice at her. The woman says he will pay for what he did to. Lucian Waldeck stands with his back to the room, surrounded by kneeling servants. A red-haired girl in a dress and apron, accompanied by two men, enters the room and expresses surprise. The boy and girl look worried. The girl says to young Master Lucian. The man reports that, as ordered, they brought the head maid. Lucian Waldeck says he can't afford to be weak and must be strong to protect those he cares about. He explains that this is his duty and responsibility. He says he is here. The man says he only asked them to bring the girl. The woman says it seems like everyone is getting too excited. The woman screams, "What does this mean?" and says that they think they can get away with it. The girl says that if they were hoping to intimidate her, they are sorely mistaken. The man says that Mr. Geordie will not let this go. Lucian Waldeck says that if they stop now, he will make sure that it ends there, and then asks who said that they are finishing. A man places his hand on a whip lying on the table. Lucian Waldeck says it's just the beginning. He grips his sword hilt tightly. The woman tells the head maid that she can say whatever she wants. Lucian Waldeck says that because the interlocutor will die right here, the guillotine is marked as an execution. It is reported that since time immemorial, this has been the most visible and effective way to warn. The man informs her that she has a good reason, and the goal is crystal clear. The text says what's most important is that it sticks in your memory. Lucian Waldeck reports that, in other words, even without changing all the servants, he says that if she doesn't want him to punish her, she should apologize immediately. The girl says that she has no intention of apologizing. The woman says that this will be quite enough. Lucian Waldeck looks ahead silently. He says that today he will deliver a message to the Archduke and informs him that the pathetic weakling, the third son, no longer exists. The man says he didn't expect this. The woman explains it's a sign for him to stop. The guy suddenly grabs the girl by the shoulder. The man tells her that if she doesn't stop resisting, she will be punished. The woman says she's not afraid and won't let them treat her like that. The man explains that the punishment will be severe and asks her to submit. Lucian Waldeck stands with a whip in his hand, watching the scene. The woman advises the young gentleman to think carefully and reports that he said he would kill her, but a girl says that if there is even a scratch on her, Mr. Geordie will not sit idly by. Lucian Waldeck says that, after all, his mother was Mr. Geordie's nanny, and he was her daughter, so they are almost like brother and sister. He says that this is all that can be said at the end, and asks if it is not a pity to waste the last words on repeating the same thing. Lucian Waldeck says that everyone will call his brother until they die, and asks if it is offensive. The man says that if the girl has any trump cards left, she should lay them down. The woman says she is talking to Mr. Geordie. Lucian Waldeck tells the head maid that she is deeply mistaken and that he already has enough reasons to execute her, starting with insulting a nobleman, negligence, incitement, embezzlement, and so on. He says the girl seems to have forgotten her place just because they were raised by the same nanny and asks what she thinks her precious Geordie will do. Lucian Waldeck says that at most he'll hit him a couple of times and calm down, but if his father intervenes, he won't be able to do that. He says that maybe he will even reward him. The woman says it's because she disciplined the insolent woman who got in. Lucian Waldeck reports that Geordie is only one of the heirs. He says that, like the one who is standing in front of the girl, Lucian Waldeck says he gave her a chance, but the woman explains that she brought the situation to this point. The man says he can't let Lucian Waldeck leave. He says he's not going to fight back. The woman says she was wrong and asks for mercy. Lucian Waldeck says he can't afford to be weak. He says to consider that the girl was just unlucky. The image does not contain any characters or speech bubbles, only a building and flowers. A man and Lucian Waldeck run down the corridor. He says that this is nonsense and simply impossible. The man says that just a couple of days ago he tucked his tail between his legs when Jenny humiliated him, but now he's furious and threatens to kill her. Lucian Waldeck reports that this is not the only oddity, and in case of something similar, he has assigned people to the outbuilding where Lucian lives. The man reports that the servants would definitely try to stop him. The man reports that things have come to this. The man says that it means he has taken control of the servants. The guy says that there is probably a mistake in the report and asks him to calm down. The man explains that, knowing the person's character, he would not have touched anyone. The man says he's most afraid of Mr. Geordie. Lucian Waldeck says there's something fishy going on here. A man screams. A loud slam of the door is heard. Blood drips from the hanging black ribbons. Lucian Waldeck says that if this isn't stopped now, it will be too late. The man reports that the wound is too serious and beyond help. He stands with a whip in his hand, watching a man who is supporting a girl with blood on her back and the floor. A man screams, asking what is happening. Lucian Waldeck says he's busy right now and suggests he come back later. The man turns to Lucian Waldeck and asks how he ended up here. The man says yes, young master. The man tells Oliver and Bert to quickly take Jenny from him. Lucian Waldeck replies that he understands. Two men rush forward. He stands and looks at the man who is holding another woman by the hair, sitting on the floor. Lucian Waldeck speaks to Hugo. He says that if anyone comes closer than 3 steps, he will cut this maid's throat. Lucian Waldeck says he takes full responsibility. The two men stop abruptly and he stands at the door watching them. The man says he will never let her out of here alive and asks her to be calm. The woman cries and says it's Mr. Geordie. The man demands that the dagger be removed and warns that if he does not comply immediately, there will be consequences. The man says that he will cut off the head of not only the person he is talking to, but also his entire family and then hang them on the castle walls. The man says he's afraid it's impossible. The man yells back that he doesn't believe it. The man says that his master is Mr. Lucian. The man explains that he has no reason to listen to someone who is not his master, and no matter what happens next, his duty is to carry out his master's orders. Lucian Waldeck explains that the woman insulted his master, disobeyed his orders, and even lied, so he is only giving her what she deserves. The man reports that his hand is shaking. The man asks Lucian what Jenny did wrong, that he was so cruel to her. Lucian Waldeck says it's important to learn to separate personal matters from professional ones. The man expresses dissatisfaction. In the Waldeck house, the first young gentleman is reported to be Tristan Waldeck, and the second young gentleman is reported to be Geordie Waldeck. Lucian Waldeck reports that a war for succession is currently underway. In other words, until the decisive day arrives for Geordie, it is critical for him to strengthen his position, no matter what. Lucian is reported to have recently publicly humiliated Geordie, causing Geordie to suffer great loss by losing his loyal knight, Sir Hendrik. Lucian Waldeck informs that in this case, if he cannot protect Jenny, who is like his right hand, the man says this will inevitably become a turning point, when distrust and doubt will begin to spread among his followers. Lucian Waldeck reports that, in short, it's a complete checkmate. The man tells Lucian Waldeck that he has won and must let her go. The guy says he didn't expect this turn of events, and the man says the situation was unexpected. The boy screams, expressing fear. The man says that if she doesn't want to die, she must obey. The girl cries and says she doesn't want to die, begging for mercy. Lucian Waldeck says it's not even funny. He says that the other person just wants to brush it all aside with one word. After someone else's valuable property was looted, the man says this. The man says he thinks his interlocutor's tongue is covered in gold and calls him a nobleman. Lucian Waldeck says he doesn't understand what he's talking about when he calls it a victory. The man explains that he was performing the duties of the third young master, and also explains that embezzlement is a crime that no one can escape, regardless of status. The man says that if they just cover it up and move on, what will people think? Lucian Waldeck says that since his esteemed brother asks so sincerely, he himself would like to close his eyes to it, but he says he doesn't have the authority to do this. Lucian Waldeck says that it is enough to beat around the bush and to speak directly, then asks what the interlocutor wants. The woman reports that since ancient times, those who encroached on someone else's property usually received appropriate punishment. The woman is crying. Lucian Waldeck announces that he is paying back several times the amount stolen. The man says he is not going to give up. Lucian Waldeck says brother, and then asks what price he means. The image does not contain any characters or speech, only the palace building is shown. The man explains that there is nothing in this world that cannot be bought with money, and that even if something is not for sale, it can be stolen or obtained in some other way. There is no text or speech in the image, so it is impossible to describe actions or communication. Lucian Waldeck reports that the incident has been resolved. The man reports that the letter contains important information. A man asks if the head butler's report is true. The man reports that he confirmed this personally. The man reports that Mr. Geordie paid young Mr. Lucian 10 times the amount in compensation. The man reports that young Master Lucian has hired a stranger named Hugo to quickly root out the spies sent into his outbuilding. The man reports that as a result of the extension of the young Master Lucian, the man reports that it is now better guarded than any other area. The man says that if a cure is not found, everyone will die. The doors are opening. Lucian Waldeck says he heard his father calling him. A man makes a sound that expresses attention or awareness of something. Lucian Waldeck says that if he can't handle this, no one can. The man explains that he can't afford to lose. He says his look has changed. Lucian Waldeck says he's been making a lot of noise lately. He says it's nothing special, he just punished the servants who didn't recognize their own master. Lucian Waldeck says he ended up disgracing his brother. The man says he won't forget it for a long time and asks if he can cope with the consequences. The man reports that it was simply a matter of tidying up. Lucian Waldeck says the same thing. He says that if he had avoided obvious responsibilities for fear of backlash, he would not have dared to bear the name Waldeck. The man says he simply made a choice that would not bring shame on their name. The man says he can't afford to lose. Lucian Waldeck says that if Geordie continues to seek quarrel with his interlocutor, he says he is free to strike back. Lucian Waldeck says that if the conflict goes too far and harms the family, he says that he will side with Girardi regardless of who is right and who is wrong, and asks what. A man turns to his father and says that he wants to know what he is. The man asks why Lucian Waldeck is so surprised. The man says that although Geordie can be short-tempered, his contribution to the family over the years has been significant. Lucian Waldeck says that, unlike his interlocutor, he hasn't been idle for a whole year. He says that as the head of the family, choosing someone who has contributed to the common cause is logical. Lucian Waldeck says that everything sounds like an order to trample his brother and rise up himself. There is no text or speech in the image, so it is impossible to describe actions or communication. The man says to increase his strength and become valuable to the family. The man says that then Lucian Waldeck will know the answer to his question. He says that in this world there are only two paths, either become stronger or perish. He explains that the weak cannot survive, and therefore one must constantly grow and develop. Lucian Waldeck says he intends to increase tension to spur him on. The man says that if he states this so categorically, it must mean that the inheritance structure will soon be determined. Lucian Waldeck explains that he was hasty and took advantage of the opportunity before he missed his chance, and that is why he wants her. The man says, "Are all fathers like this?" Lucian Waldeck says that since he is so worried, he tells his father that he would like to say something. Lucian Waldeck says he has already prepared his move. He says he is very big.